Welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I'm here to talk about books. Today I am making my February wrap up. I read 10 books in the month of February and I'm here to talk to you about them. Hey, editing Ashley here, just stopping in to say that I missed 2 books. Mary Kubica, She's Not Sorry, and TJ Newman's Falling. I will just include those in my March wrap up. But yeah, Mary Kubica was a book club read, and then the TJ Newman I finished in March, so that'll be fine. But forgot those ones. There's 8 in this video. Sorry. Just as I did last time, I'm going to be starting with my DNFs, which I did not have any in February. And then I will begin with my lowest rated and make my way up to my favorite of the month. I also figured out how to break the video up into chapters, so if you're not interested in all of the books I'm talking about, you can jump around in the video and choose which ones you want to hear about. But without further ado, let's jump into it. The first book that we're going to be talking about today would be Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. So this story is about a boy who he has a group of friends and they're all pretty close and they like playing pranks on each other. They find this mannequin one day and they decide to use him for a series of pranks that they pull. One of their friends works in a movie theater and one day they decide that they're going to take Manny the mannequin, which is what they've named him, and put him in the theater as one of the viewers of the movie. They are all surprised to see that the mannequin gets up and walks out at the end of the movie. From here on, the mannequin starts to kill. He starts targeting the other kids that are in this group of friends, and it just spirals from there. I have read a few books from Stephen Graham Jones in the past, and I was not really a big fan of any of them, so I thought I would give this one a try since it's a little guy. But yeah, this one I still was not into. So I'm not sure if Stephen Graham Jones is an author for me. One of the things that really took me out of the reading of this story is that the main character is telling you the story as if you guys are friends and you're sitting down having a conversation. But he just keeps ending all of his sentences with right and things like that. So I just felt like I was really displaced as the reader. I knew the whole time that I was reading this book that I was reading a book. And that's one of the main reasons that I enjoy reading, is because I like to use it as a form of escapism. I could barely follow along with the story because of the narrator and the way that he was talking about this mannequin. It wasn't something that I found very interesting, and the story itself, I feel like, when you're sitting there listening to somebody who's talking to you and they just keep going on and on about something that you don't care about and you're just waiting for like the end of that conversation. That's kind of how this felt to me. I also wanted to ask anybody who has read Stephen Graham Jones. I did get Mongrel on my Kindle and I'm wondering if I should read it because I don't have a good track record with him, but yeah, let me know. I'm very glad that this is a library book so I can return it and I did not spend my money on it. I gave this book 1.5 stars. The next one in my tier ranking for February would be How Can I Help You by Laura Sims. There's such a glare on these library books because of my window. Here we have a woman named Margot, and Margot is living under a different name. She is sort of hiding from her past. So she used to be a nurse, and she was kind of a, what do they call those? Like angel of death, like somebody who helps someone pass on to the other side. She's worked in several different hospitals and they were all starting to catch on her, so she would move on to the next one. That is until she met a friend at her last hospital job who she got kind of close with. This friend was onto her And so now she has moved to some random small town. She renamed herself Margot and she begins working in a library. All is going well until there is a new hire named Patricia. Patricia is an aspiring author and she sees Margot and thinks that she's a very interesting person. She's kind of sketchy about her a little bit. And she decides to start just taking notes on Margot as a character. She notices something's not quite right about Margot and she decides, if this turns into something, maybe I can base my character off of Margot. A disgruntled patron comes in and gets into kind of like an argument with Margot. And then soon after, she is found dead in the bathroom of the library. Now, more than ever, Patricia really wants to study this character and really wants to figure out what happened and kind of dig into her mysterious past. So this one was kind of a little bit of a letdown for me. I didn't really feel like a lot of things were happening in the story. There were a few exciting parts here and there that really kept me reading along, but it fell short for me. Another thing that really bothered me about this one has to do with the writing style. So I've never seen this done before, but the dialogue is written within the text. Let me see if I can find... Okay, so this one's on page 5, so it's not very much of a spoiler, but as you can see here, like it says, hey, and then goes on, and then there's somebody talking, and then there's somebody talking, and I just felt like, what is that? And then it also makes the writing so dense, like it's page to page text. So yeah, I just was kind of bothered by that throughout the entire book, and it really just kept reminding me again that I'm reading a book. I think if the dialogue was written a little bit better, then maybe I could have enjoyed it more than I did. I ended up giving this one only 2.5 stars because parts of it were very interesting and were keeping me captivated. I was able to finish it, but it wasn't very impressive. Say hi to Shadow. He wanted to be featured in today's video because he just could not be without mommy today. So yeah, he wanted to be in the video. Hi. Are you going to be on YouTube with mommy? Can't have anything to myself. Next up, we have Gone to See the Riverman by Kristopher Triana. In this one, we are following our main character, Lori, who is developing a sort of relationship with a man who is in prison because he is a serial killer. They start to get really close and he asks her for a favor. He says, hey, can you go to my cabin, pick up this key and deliver it to this person that we call the Riverman? It's a very vague description of what he wants her to do. So without knowing very much detail about what this task involves, she jumps on it because for whatever reason, she's kind of obsessed with this man. Lori is also a caretaker for her sister, who I think is named Abby, if I can remember correctly. The sister is disabled. She was injured in childhood, which left her having a hard time walking. She's got brain damage. She doesn't really have anyone else to watch her sister while she's gone, so she does end up bringing her sister with her. This favor that she is doing for this man turns into a nightmare, and it really digs up a lot of the past issues that Lori has in her childhood, a lot of the secrets that she's been holding on to, and everything kind of just spirals out into a nightmare from there. This one gets really, really dark. If you guys can't tell, I love dark books. The synopsis of this book really drew me in, and I've been wanting to read it for such a long time, so I'm glad that I finally got around to it. I finally had the excuse to pick it up because of the Buzzword title challenge, which I believe in February for the title challenge, it was something with water words. So river. Aside from the synopsis that I just gave you guys, I went in completely blind to everything else. I did not look up any trigger warnings, which is fine for me because I'm not somebody who's typically triggered by books. But if you are, definitely look into them. I felt like I had to finish this book because it's so mysterious and you really just want to know what this riverman is or why she's running this errand. But throughout a lot of the book, you're questioning, is this riverman folklore? Is he a real person? Is he some kind of ghost, some kind of monster? Overall, this one is a very interesting read, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I did enjoy my time with it. I'm glad that I read it, and I'm glad that I can add it to my roster of books. Next up, we have Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Cavanagh. Amanda's daughter was murdered, and she wants revenge. She's pretty positive she knows who killed her daughter, and this man is actively avoiding her. He has a restraining order against her. Any chance that she gets to get near to him and to carry out her desired act, he is able to successfully avoid it. Amanda ends up going to a group therapy session where she meets a woman named Wendy, and Wendy is in a very similar situation to Amanda, so they decide to make a pact to trade murders. Strangers on a train kind of trope. Then we have a third point of view from a woman named Ruth who was brutally attacked in her apartments, and the attack was interrupted, I believe, from her husband coming home, and the man was able to get away. So now Ruth lives out her life in fear that this man is going to find her and that he's going to finish what he set out to do. We're also getting a third point of view from a detective who is following both of these cases. So I'm not really a detective point of view type of person. I really do not enjoy reading from the perspective of a policeman, a detective, FBI, none of that. But these chapters from the detective's point of view were not that frequent, so it was something that I was able to get through. I think the author did a really good job of making you feel for these characters, specifically Amanda, with her going through the loss of her child. This book read super quick for me. It is a page turner. Each chapter ends on kind of like a cliffhanger or like a big reveal so that you feel inclined to pick up the next chapter immediately. So yeah, this one is a very fast read. I did enjoy my time with it, so for that reason, I did give it a 3.5. The next story that we have to talk about is Vacancy in Room 10 by Seraphina Nova Glass. This one starts out with a character named Anna receiving a phone call from her husband who is confessing to a murder and talking about how guilt-ridden he's felt keeping this secret from her and that he felt like he's ruined their lives. And then shortly after that, she is made aware by the police that his body is found, I believe, washed up on like a ravine or something. She doesn't really believe that her husband is capable of doing something so cruel. He is the sweetest man. He's a teacher. He's an artist. So she is in search of answers. And through that, she checks into the Sycamores, which is where he rented a room for his art studio. Secondly, we have a point of view from a character named Cass, who is the maintenance worker at the Sycamores. Cass recently was dumped by her boyfriend. I believe he was her boyfriend, maybe fiance, for another woman. And Cass really just had to reinvent her life and she had to start over from the bottom. So she accepted a job at the Sycamores in lieu of free rent. Now, the setting is what really made this story for me. Like, the Sycamores is a character all in of itself. The author was so clear on how run down and shitty this place is. It is a motel turned apartment complex. So in my mind, I'm thinking like a Motel 6 that was turned into an apartment complex. The author specifically states 3 strips of a 2-story building connected in a U-shape with a dumpy pool in the middle. It takes place in the desert of New Mexico. The setting is very summery. It's very hot. It just kind of plays into the dumpy, rundown apartment complex idea. Amanda and Cass both interact with what they call the pool girls throughout the book. It's a group of the other residents, primarily female, who sit at the pool all day long, just drinking and playing cards every day. They're all just like a group of outcasts, and they're all different in their own way. Seraphina Nova Glass really does explain them and build up their characters, even though they're kind of like side characters. I think that they really helped to play into the setting aspect. Again, like I said, that was my favorite part of the entire book. I also really loved Cass in this book. She starts out very angry, and she kind of is like hating life. She's not a very nice person. And then by the end of the book, I feel like she changes a lot as a character. Like, she grows throughout the story, and I really liked that. And I really liked being along the journey with her. She definitely grows more humble by the end. And this book also really plays into that like newfound family aspect, which I really enjoyed. There were a few shocking twists throughout the book, but nothing that I really felt like hasn't been done before. So I enjoyed this one mostly just for like the setting and the characters. I ended up settling on a 3.5 for this story. Next, we have Mary by Nat Cassidy. Here we have Mary, a character who has a very troubled past and who is living in solitude at her New York apartment. She also has a job at a bookstore, and she's seeing doctors because she's going through perimenopause. One day she gets a call from her Aunt Nadine asking her to come take care of her because Aunt Nadine is dying. Mary reluctantly goes back to Arizona to take care of her aunt, and when she arrives there, she starts having even more weird symptoms. She starts having these weird visions of these women that are presumably dead, and they have pillowcases over their heads, and the doctors again just chalk it up to perimenopause. This town used to have a serial killer who targeted middle-aged women. He would brutally disfigure their faces and then put pillowcases over their heads. The day that this serial killer was captured and killed was the day that Mary was born. This one is pretty long. I believe it's like just over 400 pages. And I really loved the first half of the book. I flew through the first half of the book. And then the second half just got like so crazy that I was having a really hard time keeping up with what was going on. So the second half kind of dragged a little bit more for me. I think if the author had carried all of the creepiness and what he was kind of setting up for the first half of the book and just carried that into the second half, I definitely would have enjoyed it more. I am also not really a huge fan of Stephen King, but I can definitely see this author may have taken inspiration from King's work. I specifically can see aspects of like Carrie and some stuff from The Shining in here. I did like those two books, but in general, Stephen King isn't one of my go-to authors, so I just don't really pick him up anymore. The creepiness aspect of this one was very well done. The whole story has this feeling of being just dark and dismal. There were some scenes of Mary having visions in this book where I could not look away from the page. I was so sucked in to what was going on, and it was reading to me like a movie, so I really enjoyed that as well. I also might have an unpopular opinion here, but I really liked Aunt Nadine. She was one of my favorite characters. She was just so grotesque and an unpleasant person to be around, but I think that some of her lines were so good, and she had me laughing out loud while I was reading this book. She also really plays a big role in setting up the setting for Mary and how being in Arizona is so unsettling for her. I don't know if I already mentioned this, but Mary's parents have passed away, so Aunt Nadine was the one that raised her. This is a book that I read in tandem with the audio, and if you are an audiobook listener or you have a chance to pick up the audiobook, it is fantastically done. I highly recommend the audiobook. Overall, I gave Mary a 4-star rating. Next up, we have The Spare Room by Andrea Bartz. I'm so sorry about this glare. Nothing I can do about it. There's a window right here. Either my video is going to be really dark or the books are going to have a glare on them. So yeah, but here you go. This is a story that is taking place during the lockdown of 2020. Our main character, Kelly, was supposed to be planning a wedding with her fiance before she was stuck in quarantine. That is until her fiance requests that they hold off on the wedding altogether. Maybe even call it off. Kaale has recently rekindled a friendship with somebody that she knew from high school named Sabrina, and they've been talking back and forth online for a while. Kaale tells her what's going on, and Sabrina asks her to come stay with her and her husband in their mansion in Virginia. They have been going through some relationship struggles, so Kaale decides that maybe it's best if they do give each other some space. Kaale takes the opportunity and travels out via train with her cat to this lavish, secluded mansion in Virginia. She ends up finding herself developing feelings for both Sabrina and her husband and doesn't really know how to feel about that until one night when they're all hanging out and they get intoxicated and the three of them end up having correlations. At this point, Sabrina and Nathan decide that they are willing to open up their marriage for Kaale, and she thinks, why the hell not? While in complete bliss and enjoying her two new partners, Kaale discovers that she is actually not the first person that these two have opened up their marriage for, and the previous woman is now a missing person. She finds herself wondering, do Sabrina and Nathan have something to do with this missing person, and is she safe with these two people that she just locked herself up with? So the funny thing about this one is that I actually started reading it in, I believe, August, but we were in the middle of the move and I did not have time to read like I wanted to, and I thought this one deserved my full attention. So I soft DNF'd it, but ever since doing that, it was on my mind constantly and I really wanted to pick it back up. So of course I had to do it. I think this one delivers something really new to the genre that I haven't seen before, so it was very exciting for me to read. It's twisty, it's isolated, it's mysterious, and I was flipping these pages like there is no tomorrow. I also found the character of Kaale to be pretty relatable. She clearly struggles with anxiety because something would come up and it would have her really overthinking things, being in her head, and then she would come to a conclusion on her own, or she would work it out with her partners, and then something else would happen and it would send her back on that tailspin of not knowing who to trust and not knowing what was going on. Also, I really loved the cat in this book. I thought it just added a little bit of coziness for me, as I am a cat owner and I do love cats. So yeah, with this one, I ended up giving it 4 stars. Last but not least, we have my favorite book of February and a new favorite of all time, which is The First Day of Spring by Nancy Tucker. This one is a dual timeline. We are in the mind of a girl named Chrissy who is 8 years old and just committed a murder. And then the second timeline is her when she's an adult. She's living under a different name and she has a child of her own. The parts where we're following her as a child, we are kind of trying to piece together why she committed this murder and really where her thought processes are coming from. She lives a very troubled life, but she's also a kid, an only child, so she doesn't really understand a lot of what's going on or why, and why her life is so much different from other kids that she's friends with. Her dad is always in and out of the picture, and her mom is extremely neglectful to her. Her mom doesn't really feed her. She doesn't really give her attention. Chrissy wets the bed a lot, and she really just kind of feels like a nuisance. And as an only child, this is really the only life that she knows. She doesn't really understand why her life is the way that it is or why it's so much different from other kids her age. She is known by a lot of the other people in her town as this troublesome little kid who is always acting out and needs some sort of discipline. Her mom doesn't really care where she is or what she's doing, so for most of her childhood point of view, she's just wandering the streets of her neighborhood. She scavenges for food, for attention. She really talks about like the other kids' parents a lot because they're the ones that are actually giving her any sort of attention. As an adult, she has her own child, Molly, and she's overseen by a caseworker. So it almost feels to her like she's walking on eggshells. She thinks that her child is going to end up getting taken away. She's even afraid to answer the phone because she feels like somebody is going to be on the other line that knows who she is and that is going to try to intervene in her relationship with her daughter. So at first when I was reading this one, it was so hard for me to want to read it because the perspective of her when she's 8 years old, I almost felt like I had to translate what she was trying to say and what she was perceiving so that I could understand it. Her brain is very undeveloped, and that comes across in the writing. This book really makes you sit back and think about childhood and parenthood and how formative those early years are for a kid, how much of an impact those early relationships have on a developing mind. I loved watching her as an adult just really step into that role as a parent and experience unconditional love for the first time in her life, despite not having an example of how to give that throughout most of her childhood. One of the things that I wanted to touch on that I noticed throughout the entirety of this novel is how superficial her relationships are with those around her. Like conversations even in her childhood that she's having with her dad, with her mom, with other kids, and then as an adult, the things that she's talking about with her caseworker. She doesn't really know how to like show affection or to communicate what her feelings are. So for a lot of the book, most of it is spent in her head. And then when she's having a conversation with somebody, it's very basic and minimal because she doesn't know how. It's really not until she gets into like a safe place with somebody where she can feel like she can open up and actually be herself and be a person with feelings, with emotions. I think that's really telling what kind of effect neglect has on a person, even in their adulthood. I think Molly was really the first person who she allowed herself to break down those walls with and to love and be loved wholeheartedly without holding back. As you're feeling for this character and you're getting to know her, you also have it in the back of your mind that she's a murderer. She's killed someone. You really do come to a conclusion about why she did this and how she really didn't understand what she was doing or what the consequences were. And I think like the constant in and out of people in her life really played a role in that decision that she's made, because she didn't know that this person wasn't going to come back. This book really pulled at my heartstrings. Like, I felt so much for Chrissy, and not only do I think this is going to be one of my favorite books of all time, but I think it's going to be one of my favorite characters of all time. I also never really cry for books, but this one just about had me in tears because I got so emotionally attached to this character. I was so sad to part ways with it. I think that this is always going to hold a special place in my heart. This is also a library book, so I'm definitely going to go out and purchase myself my own copy because I could really see myself annotating this one and just going through, writing all of my notes, reading it over and over again. I loved this, and I found it to be like a character study. But yeah, overall, 5-star book from me. I'm going out and I'm purchasing my own copy. I really, really loved this, and I do recommend it to anybody who's interested in reading about character development, trauma, things of that sort. I think this one was very important. Okay guys, so that is it for today. Those are the 10 books that I read in February. If you liked this video, please like, don't forget to subscribe. And then if you have anything that you would like to say, if you've read any of these books, with these monthly wrap-ups, if you end up picking up a book because of my video, I would love to know, and I would love to know what you think. So yeah, until next time, see you guys later. Bye.